battling the relentlessly negative doom and gloom news media. It's the Nick Stenger Show, coming to you live from the Stenger Family Office headquarters. It's your host, Nick Stenger.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Nick Stenger Show. My name is Nick Stenger. We are the Stenger Family Office for the past 42 long years. It has been our mission to deliver both clarity and confidence to help secure your financial future. Welcome back. Hard to believe. Episode 120. Thank you for joining us, and many of you have been with us since the very beginning. Thank you for coming back each and every week for what I call the clarity and confidence, the good news, the reasons backed by data, why you should stay on your plan. And if anything proves that more than this year, it's just been astounding to watch how the doom and gloomers, the bearish people, the most bearish people on Wall Street at the end of 2022. I even came across an article that was written at the time that basically said, if you thought 2022 was bad, remember market was down 20%, just wait, you ain't seeing nothing yet. 2023 is going to be even worse. And remember, we told you don't buy into that doom and gloom. And so if you have a hard time, like all of us do, ignoring the media, this is the place you need to go at least once a week for a half hour a week. Get on these shows, get the content. That's why we do this, is to give you the opposite of that doom and gloom noise. There's signal and there's noise. Noise is the 24/7 ticker tape flying across the screen. It's the nonstop negativity. It's all the reasons why the world is coming to an end. And the surprising thing about the stock market is for 200 years, despite terrible news, despite things that are just beyond our imagination as how bad they would have been at the time to live through, the stock market continues to go up. And the reason for that is because earnings, company profits, continue to rise over time. So do not get bearish, do not get doom and gloom. We've got this week's episode entitled, Why We're Still Bullish. I would encourage you, stay bullish with us. Yes, we've been realistic about the possible downside, some of the negativity out there. And I do think there probably is some risk to the downside at some point, whether it's later this year in 2023, maybe in 24. But obviously there is going to be some sort of volatility, some pullback. Don't let that bounce you off your plan. Stay invested. Stick on the plan. Why we're still bullish? Well, I'm about to give you a couple reasons, but before I do, I just want to remind you we've got a big open house event. Last chance to register, and you don't even have to register. You can just show up if you'd like as well. But next Thursday, July 27th, at our new headquarters, 400 East Diehl Road. Don't miss it. In Naperville, come see the new office. All of our teams is going to be here. All of their families and spouses and kids will be at the office as well. Come say hi to everybody. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have food, beverages. Don't miss it. Next Thursday, the 27th, from 4 to 8 p.m. Stop by anytime. We'd love to see you. And then we've got a series of webinars going on right now, and we plan to do one more by the time this show airs. The next one on the calendar will be the 26th of July. So Wednesday, the 26th, will be Honeywell 401k webinar. Don't miss it. You got to see that one. That's going to be fantastic. Don't miss the Honeywell webinar on the 26th. And then looking ahead to the future, September 7th in Oak Brook at Gibson's Steakhouse. Don't miss it. The legendary, and I mean legendary, Dr. Jeremy Siegel of the Wharton School, Wisdom Tree Asset Management, who we've had in the past, wrote the book, Stocks for the Long Run. You can't miss him. Stocks for the Long Run, Dr. Jeremy Siegel, September 7th at Gibson's, lunchtime, 11:45 start. We're also recording a podcast with him, so if you can't make lunch, you got to watch the pod. It's going to be great. And then fast forward all the way to November 14th and 15th, Annual Investor Day. Don't miss that in Naperville at the Hotel Indigo right downtown. If you're coming in, we have a room block available. Call us, get on the room block ASAP so we can save you a spot. Can't wait for all this stuff. Can't wait to see you at some of these events. We'll see you soon, hopefully. Let's jump into this week's content. You know, for our entire 42-year history, going back to 1981, if you know our family, if you know our team, all the way back then, we have been bullish since day one. And we like to say that optimism is the only realism, that the reality of the stock market and the reality of the U.S. economy is simply that over time things have gotten better for consumers, for employees, for companies, for the least of these, for the people at the very bottom, for the people, of course, at the top, but even for the people at the bottom, they have been lifted into a standard of living that the world has never seen. And so we should be optimistic. We should be long-run bullish because of not government trying to save us. Anytime government gets involved, it actually ends up hurting us. What we want is we want entrepreneurs. We want innovation. We want people coming up with new ideas, with new services and new products, bringing down cost. And if you want a greener future, if you want a better world for your kids to grow up in, if you want a world where things are better, cheaper, faster, and better working conditions and all the rest of it, you should love entrepreneurship like we do. You should just love innovation, because innovation is the driver of bringing costs down, number one, but also making life better. And look at how medical, our system here in the U.S., yes, a little expensive due to the administrative burden that we have, but it's the best system on earth. We have the best care out of any place on earth. That's why people come here, for our medical system. We have so much to be happy about, so many breakthroughs technologically. People are living longer than ever. Cancer mortality is down. People are doing better. We are lifting the bottom 10% up over time. And I believe it's all thanks to U.S. entrepreneurs who have brought down costs. Think about the Walmart story and how instead of just charging more on less items, Walmart invented the whole model of discount and volume-based pricing. And so thanks to companies like Walmart, thanks to companies like Ford Motor Company and Apple and Amazon and all these wonderful companies out there, yeah, they've had maybe some ups and downs over the years. But broadly speaking, when you look at history, they just think about what they've done for consumers and for the rest of the economy. It's absolutely incredible, and that is one of the big reasons why we are still bullish. Now, on an investment front, we have kept you in U.S. large cap blue chip stocks. We will not, for the foreseeable future, deviate away from that strategy simply because it is one of the best ways to invest, to get access to all areas of the world. It's one of the best ways to keep your money in places where we have a high degree of a chance of making a profit over time. And I still have yet to be convinced that you can make a profit long-term in China. I still have yet to be convinced that Europe is a good place to allocate capital, or that Japan is a place that you'd want to allocate capital. And while that may change in the future, we don't know, maybe things will get better in those places. Right now today, as far as the eye can see, U.S. blue chip stocks have been the number one place to hold your capital. We are portfolio managers. We have to make a capital allocation decision at the end of every year. It's called our rebalance due diligence process. That's what we do in November. That's the event we have coming up, Investor Day. When we allocate your capital, we have a huge responsibility on our hands. We have to actually take your dollars, invest them, put them in things that we think are going to do well, and then and produce a result over time. And if we don't produce results, you'd end up firing us. You'd say, Nick, this isn't really you're not making me any money. And so we have done that over time. And the way that we've done it is just by using common sense. I call it critical thinking, and it's simply owning companies in a place like the United States where there's the rule of law and personal property rights, where entrepreneurs that create a business here actually have something to show for themselves at the end of their lives. And so at the very end of their lives, when they're passing down their wealth the way that they want to and the way that they intend, it goes according to their wishes, and it's not a government-run program where the government takes the business away or takes away the wealth like some communist regimes, like some authoritarian places. You can never, ever, ever sustainably grow an economy when you have a communist bent. You just can't. And maybe you have overt authoritarianism like North Korea. Maybe you have it subliminally where it's sort of through the back door, through the Federal Reserve and through central banking, which is clearly the authoritarian push that they want us to go towards. But simply put, if you don't have the rule of law and personal property rights, that's not a great place to invest. And so one of the interesting things that's happening across the globe is companies and people, and this has always been true, but certainly now more than ever, people are migrating towards places that they believe there's more freedom. People have a desire, I think, inside of them. It comes from God. I think God puts us in all of us, a desire for freedom. We desire to be free. And because of that, capitalism, entrepreneurship lines up with human nature. That's why it works so well. And yeah, there's problems with it. We all know the problems with some of these systems, but it's of course been a fantastic way to lift people out of poverty across the globe for hundreds of years. And so today, thanks to what we have done in our country, thanks to the entrepreneurs that have come here from all over the world, they've come from China, from India, from Africa, from Asia, from all over the place. Thanks to the entrepreneurship, the innovation, we have lowered child mortality to rock bottom levels. We have lowered abject poverty, defined as living on less than $2 per day, which is a very low starting point, but it is a start. You got to start somewhere to define abject poverty. That is all down. And so that's just fantastic. You should be optimistic. Remember, like Dr. Siegel, who's coming in September, said in his book, Stocks for the Long Run, stocks, and don't forget this, are a claim on real assets. Once you remember that stocks are a claim on real assets, you do not worry about the day-to-days in the market. You do not worry about the short-term volatility. You don't worry about your account being up 1 or 2% per day or down 2 or 5 or 10 or 20% in a bear market. You don't even think about it. What you think about is, do I own companies that have the propensity, that have the ability? Does my claim on these companies, is there a viability that they are going to make it through a market storm? And like we've always told you, it's not that the storms aren't going to happen. It's not that the waves won't rise up. And you remember the parable in the Bible about the wise man and the foolish man. And the foolish man builds his house on the sand. And of course, the waves come and the storms come. And what happens? Well, his house falls, right? It's built on sand. And so that's market volatility. If you place all of your importance in your portfolio and you base your entire investment account just on market timing and hoping that the market's up or down and thinking that you can get in and get out and know when to hold them and know when to fold them and all the rest of it, you will quickly fall. It may take time, but it might just be that next bear market, and that's all it takes to wipe you out. So be careful. Don't build your investment portfolio on sand. Rather, build it on the rock. And when the storms come, they will come, you will make it through because you own companies that have great balance sheets, great entrepreneurs running them, great management teams. And think about what you have with this claim on real assets. Remember that stock certificate. Now, you may not have stock certificates in your house anymore, but they're somewhere and they belong to you. And those stock certificates basically give you access to management teams. So all these top companies, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Amazon, JP Morgan, Lockheed Martin, Procter & Gamble, ExxonMobil, Chevron, Honeywell, all these great companies are run by the most brilliant people on earth. And so sometimes there's a bad CEO in there once in a while. Of course, that can happen. But over time, they are run so well. They're run by the most brilliant minds. And those people do not worry about the day-to-day ups and downs. They have 10-year plans. They have 15-year plans. They have long-run vision on the value that they're trying to create for shareholders. And if they do that over time, you will see the value of your portfolio rise. That's why we're optimistic on the future of the U.S. economy. Another reason why we're bullish is because of a couple of big global economic trends that are happening, I think are going to continue powering growth at least through the year 2029. This was from one of the strategists who used to be at JP Morgan and has his own company now at Fundstrat, Tom Lee, and he believes we're going to have just a bull market through 2029, not without any corrections, not without complete straight line up forever, but he thinks the market's going to do just fine. And one of those reasons, I think, is because the U.S. is still the leader in the globe for population growth. You do not see this in other places. Europe is having a tremendous population problem. China has gotten itself into a mess with the one-child and now the two-child and the three-child policy. It's been a disaster. They cannot get people to have babies. Same thing in Japan. Japan has a massive population problem. And so Fundstrat, which tracks this, has said that, hey, when you have a boom in economic growth, it's almost always correlated with a boom in population growth. Population is the driver. It's not the detriment to the economy. It literally is the future growth of the economy. And like all these doom and gloomers said in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, 2000s, that oh, we're going to run out of space on Earth because we don't have enough population, or that we have too much population, they've all been proven wrong. It's actually the opposite of that, and that's the book Abundance. You got to go get that book if you really want some reasons to be optimistic, that population in the U.S. is actually increasing, and part of the reason is due to our excellent immigration. We are attracting the best people in the world. We are getting the top minds from China, India, Japan, all over the place. They're not inventing the technology in their country. They're coming here to do it because of the rule of law and personal property rights, knowing that they'll be rewarded for what they create. Number two reason why you should be optimistic is because of the emerging markets. Now, I am not an advocate yet of owning emerging market stocks. I think you can be completely wiped out there. You got to be very careful on the emerging market, actual local stocks themselves. However, how do we get access to the emerging markets? How do we get access into China and India and Africa and Indonesia and Latin America? Well, it's through U.S. companies that sell into those markets that get a lot of their revenue from those countries. Look at Apple. A recent report came out, Wall Street analyst report came out that said 20% of Apple's growth the next 5 years is going to come from just India alone. India has become a major benefactor of the Chinese trade war, which started in 2018. India saw the opportunity. They came out with tax cuts. They came out with a crackdown on corruption and crime and all the rest of it. And so India has really positioned itself. If you read all of the top and most brilliant investment minds out there, they're talking about India. India has 1.4 billion people, almost as much as China, but a much more favorable entrepreneurial environment. You look at, just as a couple examples, some of the U.S. companies that get a lot of revenue from China. That's another place where we want to be exposed to through U.S. companies, not Chinese stocks directly, but U.S. companies that sell into those markets. Are Broadcom, 50% of their revenue comes from China, 66% of Qualcomm's revenue, 75% of Wynn Resorts. I'm not telling you to buy these stocks directly necessarily. I'm just giving you examples of where these people get their revenue. It's all China. It's all India. It's all these Latin American countries. So you want exposure to these places through U.S. corporations. That's a lot of growth. Another reason why you ought to be positive long term. Now, I will just preface the China thing by saying, obviously, we have to be careful, and I have been one of the most outspoken opponents against the Chinese CCP model of throwing their richest people in jail, making them disappear, going to prison camps. The Uyghurs, of course, we've talked about them in the past. So I know the risk of doing business in China. I totally get that. And you have to be very careful if you plan to do business in China, because they basically make you give them all their trade secrets and all the rest of it. So what I think is ultimately going to happen is the CCP will either have to pivot. They're going to have to introduce much, much more free speech, democracy, elements of technology, and not shut it down like the U.S. has done, or they will have trouble long term. And one of the bright spots is Elon Musk's company Starlink, and they're sending these satellites up to the sky, millions of them, I think, is ultimately what it'll be, that can project internet into the most remote places on Earth, but also into these countries that whenever there's a protest, they just turn off the internet. That's all over with technology. So remember, technology, yes, there's some downside to it, and we have to be smart about the regulation around it. But technology is the driver. It goes hand in glove with democracy. The more and more innovation we have, the more individual liberty we have, the more democracy and more free speech we have, you'll see all of these things go hand in hand. And when there's an authoritarian crackdown and you see the government get in the way of individuals, watch out. because you will see the stock market suffer as a result. That's been what China's experienced, or not India, but China, Japan, and Europe has experienced with bad policy. They can always pivot, and the world has gone through massive pivots over time. It's gone through these times where sometimes policy gets passed that's favorable for entrepreneurs, and so we're watching that. We want to look around the corner and see where the puck is going, and if good policy is passed, we may happen to invest in these places. But for now, I think you got to stay U.S.-based where you have these protections. We're bullish on the future of the U.S. economy, number 3, also because what we see going on at a ground level just with our clients, you and I and the rest of our people that we work with, I go back to 1993. We have data going back even further, but just the past 30 years, the average Stenger client in 1993 had about $500,000 in investable assets. Fast forward 30 years until today, 2023, and that average now that we see is $1.5 million. That's a 3.7% annualized increase the past 30 years in average client. Remember, on the 4% rule, people are spending that money. They're not just holding $1.5 million and doing nothing with it. People are spending it. They're using it for basic living expenses. They're buying cars, vacations. They're gifting to their grandkids, for example. So when you go from $500,000 to $1.5 million, you triple, your expenses triple. That's part of the reason why the economy has grown so much the past 30 years. But when we run projections 15 years from today, the average retiree will not be $1.5 million, but will be $3.5 million. And that's an annualized increase of 5.8% per year. So just looking at our data alone, and you can look all this up, you can substantiate this with the wealth transfer data. That's what they call it, this great wealth transfer that's coming as the baby boomers pass down their wealth to the next generation, to the millennials. The 40 and 50-year-olds of today, of 2023, I think in the next 15 years we'll be spending 3 times more than the baby boomer generation on an inflation-adjusted basis by the year 2038. That's a massive reason to be optimistic, a massive reason to be bullish, because all of this spending, again, spending is directly correlated to portfolio size. So all of this spending, I think, are going to continue driving earnings. It's going to continue driving stock prices. And just another reason why you cannot panic. You got to hold on to these reasons when you're going through the downturns and make sure that you're not losing sight of the big picture. In the short run, we expect volatility as the economy absorbs the impact of higher interest rates. I've talked about this for the past few weeks, that we're probably not out of the woods completely. I would love if we were. That'd be great. But the reality is the spending we have done the past 3 years under COVID is going to have some sort of timeline where we are going to have to absorb some of that in the economy. I don't think we're completely out of the woods yet. Don't be surprised because of that if we see some volatility. And so the good news is, my opinion here, when you look at the research, you look at the earnings estimates until 2025, 26, some of the long-range predictions, corporate earnings should be just fine. Remember, that's half of the equation on how we derive a stock's price. So remember, a stock's price is simply a math equation. It's just how much are earnings, and then how much are those earnings worth in the future. The earnings are decided by how well the company does. So earnings are projected to be great. We're looking at $273 on the conservative side for earnings by the year 2025, which the market will trade by 2024. So don't forget how that works. It's always the market's a forward-looking indicator. So that's positive. The real question, though, is the second part of that equation, which is how much are those earnings worth? How much is the $273 worth? Is it worth 10 times, placing the market at roughly 2,730 points? That would be a historical low. That's what some of the doom and gloomers on Wall Street have said. I do not agree with them. Is it 15 times, placing the market closer to maybe the 4,000 range, or just a little bit under that? Is it the 20 times earnings range? Is it 25 times like we had in the COVID era? Some people, I think, have been overly bullish, thinking that interest rates are going back to their all-time record lows that would cause the market to be significantly undervalued today. And some people have come out with these crazy, even more bullish than I am, projections that the market would trade for 6,000 points in 2 years. I think that's a little overdone. I think that's probably a little bit too optimistic. That'd be great, again, if that happened. I don't think it will. But I am not projecting that the market goes down to these 2,000 point levels or under 3,000 or even mid threes. I think that's overly bearish. And so just stay on your plan. We are going to continue to see this steady growth, I believe. We may not see the face rippers, melt your face off, through the roof returns that we saw during COVID, but I don't think we're going to have the bottom fall out. We're just going to continue to see entrepreneurs chug along. They're going to work the problem. They're going to figure it out. They're going to make more money than they made last year over time. And your portfolio, remember, your claim on real assets will benefit because of that over time. Stay on the plan. Join us for one of our events. Call us if you need us. Give us a call. Get a starter account going. Remember, our minimum's just $1,000. That's all it takes to get started with our group. This was episode 120. We'll see you next time for episode 121. Hey, Pat, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited. We met very briefly at your office there the other week, and Sam thought it'd be great to get you on the show. And we love talking to local business folks, and especially people like you in the real estate industry. We try to tell our clients that there is a real economy underneath the surface, and you have to do a little digging for it to find the optimistic reasons about the economy to stay on their plan. And so hopefully you can shed some light, maybe give us some data and what's going on. You're in the housing world and the real estate world, and also give people some optimism today. I hope that there's some optimism in real estate. What are you seeing at your company, Southwestern Real Estate? You guys are based in Nashville. You're the president of the company, is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
So I live in Glen Ellen. I personally sell real estate in the western burbs of the Chicago market. And I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. We can dive into some of that. Now, I will say this. So I'm not an economist. I'm in the sales world. I help people buy and sell real estate every day. But obviously, I want to pay close attention to what the economists are saying. And I think that at least the people I'm paying attention to are very optimistic. And I can share some stats around that.
Yeah, sounds great. How'd you get in with Southwestern? Have you been there your whole career, or where'd you start at?
Yeah, so this is kind of a unique origin story. So, okay, so I grew up in southern Wisconsin, came down to go to Wheaton College. And while I was there, I had to pay for school myself. Sophomore year, this kid calls me up and he says, hey, what are you doing next summer? Because I had this really crazy job selling books in Michigan last summer with this company called Southwestern, and I made $12,000, and I'm going to go do it again. And that was back in 1992, so that was like real money. And I was like, you made $12,000? I was like, man, I made $3,000 working 3 jobs. So I'm like, yeah, I'd like to hear about it. And he said, all right, come to this meeting, and we'll tell you all about it. So I'm thinking working at a bookstore in Michigan sounds pretty easy. But then I get to the meeting and they're like, oh, well, actually, it's not a bookstore. It's we're selling books, educational products to families door to door. And this year we're going to be in North Dakota. And I'm thinking, man, this sounds like one of those things that just doesn't turn out well. But then they pulled out the products and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what this is. We have those at my house. Like, we had a kid stop at my house when I was a kid in Wisconsin, and my parents bought these books, and they're really good. And I was like, oh, people buy these. So that company is called Southwestern Advantage, and they work with college kids. And so I did it, and I made about $16,000 that summer. Went back the next year, got a chance to sell in Iowa. And again, it's door to door. It's 80 hours a week, straight commission. Second summer, I made about 25. Third summer was about 40. And my fourth summer was about 45,000. So I tell all that to say the sales training that, was a part of that was amazing. But when I graduated from school, I was also thinking, I don't think I really want to teach. I think I would like to, recruit college students to work at that, work in that program, because it was kind of a life-changing experience. So I became a sales manager with Southwestern Advantage and started recruiting college kids, and eventually that grew to being all over the country. But as we started a family, it just got harder to be on the road, and I didn't want to be on the road. And so eventually, I think I was there 13 years. And then finally I came in and I said, you know what, it's time for me to be at home. I got to quit. And they said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't really know, but I'm flipping a house right now, just kind of on the side. And I think this was 2005. So you could do just about anything in real estate and it would probably turn out. Like, even if you made all the mistakes, there was just so many things that the wind was at your back. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to see if I can make enough doing that. And then maybe I'll do that. I don't know. And the CEO of the corporation, we knew each other pretty well because his kids actually sold books in my group as my sales manager group. So we got to know each other well. And Henry was like, oh, you want to be in real estate? We want to be in real estate. And I'm like, what do you guys want to do? And he's like, well, so many of our students have gone on to great success selling real estate. We want to start a brokerage that we could scale nationally. And, why don't we just do that together? And I said, no, I want to flip houses. That's like totally different. And I don't know anything about being a realtor. Like, I don't know. I know two realtors that are both old ladies. And I'm like, I don't see it, And he said, well, it's not an old lady job. There's a lot of successful people that do it. And if you'd be interested, we'd love to explore it. And at the time, I just wasn't in a place to really think about that, So I just said, I'll think about it. And so I left, and I really thought, I'm not going to think about it. I got home, and as I did flip a couple more houses, the recession was setting in here in 2006. You could see it coming. And
how could you see it coming?
Well, let's just say this anecdotally. I made disappointing money on my first flip. I barely broke even on my second, and the third one became a distressed property, short sale with the bank. And I was like, we were smarter on each one, and the opportunity for the value of the finished product just kept dropping. And it was like, whoa. Now, there was an interesting point. So I was also highly leveraged in real estate through out west with partners, and they started to go bankrupt, leaving me with some undesirable properties. It was getting pretty dark. But as I watched the realtor help me on those flips, I thought, okay, I think it could be done better than what I'm getting, but I actually see the value in that position. And I think if it was done better, there's a real opportunity to help people. So my disappointment, although my appreciation for her kind of showed me this is worth looking into. And it reminded me of Henry's invitation from, a year earlier. So I did start researching it. Like, how do you become a real estate agent? How do you establish a brokerage? How does the money work? What's the business model? And there's several models, that people have come up with. And I just kind of started to explore that, interviewing people. But about a year after he had originally offered, I called Henry back and I said, hey, I think I've figured this out, at least a model that would be worth doing. And to be honest with you, I'm not interested in just starting Pat Roach Real Estate. I would like to do it with you because of that talent pool that you guys produce. I think that's a winning combination of really talented salespeople with a good model. And I think we could do something with that. And it was much more important to me to be able to be involved with good people, with good supports, than it was necessarily starting my own thing and being by myself, keeping all the money. That wasn't as important.
So did you start as president, or did you kind of work your way up, or what's your trajectory been?
With that one phone call, I said, so Henry, if you're still interested, I'd be interested. And he said, great, you're the president. Let's start.
There you
go. It was as simple as that. And then he said, send me a budget and we'll get going. And I was like, I don't know how to do a budget. And he's like, oh, we got people for that. Don't worry. And they took care of me, and we got started. And basically what he said is, I know you don't really know what you're doing, and we don't know what we're doing, but we've started other businesses before, and we'll figure this out as we go. Let's just get you set up on a salary that you can sustain yourself and your family, and then when your sales exceed what we're paying you, then you just switch over to commission, and we'll just do that. It took about, I think at the end of my third year, I had, even though the recession was in full blast, it was the end of the third year where I was able to switch over to commission. And then I stayed a one-person company because it was so dicey during that time that I really didn't feel comfortable bringing anybody else in yet. But at about the 5-year mark is when somebody approached me, somebody who lives in Sugar Grove, and she sold books when she was a college student and heard about Southwestern real estate. And she was like, my youngest is going to be in school soon. I want to get back into sales. And I was like, wow, I really haven't recruited anybody to do this with me yet. And I was loving the career at that point. Like, it's a really ideal career. And then I said, fine, let's talk about this. And we went through it, and she was our she was our second employee after if you consider our controller, who's now our CFO. And she's crushing it, and it was so fun having another person to work with that it made me go, I wonder if there's some other cool people that we could add. And slowly over the years, we've added key individuals that we're very picky about who we hire. But now we're in 8 states. Wow. And it's starting to, it feels like it's got legs for the future.
So for people that don't know, Southwestern is how many people now? How much revenue? Give us kind of the background.
So we started hiring people about 10 years ago. And again, like I said, very slow to add. We're now between 50 and 55 agents in 8 states. And we'll probably do about $5 million in revenue this year. And I feel like the next couple of years, we're going to see some real growth. We've got a bunch of new folks in our pipeline that we'll be bringing in. And so, yeah, I'm pretty optimistic about it.
So $5 million in revenue, how much in sales does that equate to?
Jeez, that's a good question. Okay, let me see. I should probably be able to figure it out because it's probably about $200 million in real estate sales.
Wow. That's got to put you, top 1% in the country?
Well, let me say it this way. So my personal sales are about 25 million. So as an individual, I'd be in the top 1% for, realtors in the Chicago market, for sure. As a company of all of that business, it'd be hard to compare it because, you're talking about a full company, a full brokerage, and that would be, putting us up against all the big boys, across the country. And so we wouldn't be real elite. It's more of a boutique brokerage.
So why start Southwestern? You talked a little bit about it, but what have you guys built that's different? Why not just go to a Remax or a Coldwell Banker? Why did you guys feel like there's something in the market that hasn't been addressed yet?
Yeah, that's a great question. I struggled with that for a long time. Like, what are we doing that's any different? Why wouldn't somebody just go to Keller Williams? They've got, they're the biggest, or I think they had the highest number of agents at the time we were starting or something like that. And then there's Remax that does more volume still. And so why not go to these established things? I think it depends on what the agent wants in the way of culture. In the end, my responsibility of creating a business is all about what culture am I creating? And how does that line up with the wants and needs of the people who come work here? I will give you this example. This kind of like was a little bit of a click for me. Because I had interviewed a lot of different agents in the process of trying to figure out how to do it, right? And I talked to a lot of managing brokers. And what you find is, I won't name names in terms of brokerages, but I was with a managing broker of a really large brokerage, big brand name. And he was telling me about the number of agents that they have and everything. And I was like, man, your offices are beautiful. And all this kind of stuff. And he's like, yeah, we've got all these agents. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And he's like, well, and then he turns and looks over his shoulder and he leans back in. And he's like, I mean, 80% of them are going to do 5 deals or less this year. And probably half of them are going to do 0. I'm like, well, how's that happen? Like, do you train? Or, oh yeah, we train. We've got every training tool that we find, we get it. We spend on tons of training materials. But most of the people just, they don't either show up or they don't apply it or whatever. And I said, well, what about the really top producing people? Like, don't they help out and like train and help people, get started? And he's like, no. He's like, they view all the other people in the office as competition. So they don't want to share their best ideas. Now, when I was hearing all of that, I was like, now that's a culture, right? And that was not what I was used to with my experience selling books. When we were selling books, whoever did well that week got to get up in front of the group and say, here's what's working for me. Here's how I'm making it happen. And here's how I just had my best week. And it's a combination of some technical things, but it was a lot of, here's where my head's at. Here's how I'm able to stay focused or do the things that I want to do over the course of these grueling schedules. So I was like, man, and the way that territory was split up in that thing was such that you could cheer for people who did well, right? Like if somebody had their best week, you were excited for them. And you knew that they would be excited for you if you had your best week. And here I looked at this office and I thought, these guys view each other as competition. They don't want to share their best ideas. And people aren't showing up for the training for all of these reasons. Well, I thought, it partly depends on your viewpoint on the market or the marketplace for me to find clients, right? So if I have some kind of, there's a system called farming in real estate where you pick a geographical area and you just kind of go over it and over it with different marketing techniques. If that's your strategy, you're going to spend a lot of money to do it, but you might become eventually known as the agent for that area, right? And that's kind of what you're working for the long haul. Well, it makes sense if you have a coworker or somebody in that office who's saying, yeah, I just actually picked up a new client and they're right in this neighborhood and it's your neighborhood, then you're angry. You're like, that's supposed to be mine. Like, what are you doing? Well, that's not how we've built our businesses. Not that we tell people they can't. We just say this isn't maybe the most efficient use of your resources and time and energy, especially if you've got a great personality and you're good at sales and you know how to build relationships. The most effective way, the most sustainable model is to work by referral. So what that means is getting to know a lot of people, building great relationships so there's a high level of trust, and then informing them to say, hey, when your friends need real estate help, I'd love it if you'd keep me in mind. Now, if people already know you and like you, they're very excited to actually pass your name along because they want to encourage you and your business, right? So we teach that model. And what's beautiful about it is if Don works in our company and Don's building a network of people who will keep him in mind, even though Don and I know some of the same people, we've either talked to them and some of those people are well, I'd probably send them to Pat, or some of those people are like, well, Don and Angel are some of our best friends, so we'll send them over there. It's wherever the relationship is strongest, and if those conversations have been had, that people then buy in and send their referrals to that person. But that's just a matter of doing the work. So I can't be mad if somebody I know sends a client to Don. It's like, well, whatever, Don did the work of, getting connected to that person. And because we respect each other, then it's like, if Don's talking to somebody and he says, hey, do you have somebody that you send your friends to? And they're like, yeah, probably Pat. You go, oh, that's awesome. Then you're covered. Okay, good. So I can root for Don's success and Don can root for my success. And ultimately, these things build our brand in the marketplace. So we want all of our people to do really well. And here's where this finally showed up, where I'm like, we're doing something right. I was talking with a managing broker from another office in, I think it was either Aurora or Naperville. And she was talking about the biggest office in the western suburbs. It had over 400 agents. And this was a while back. We only had 20 people in our company at the time, so it was a little while back. And she said, did you know out of those 400, there are only 28 that sold $5 million of houses last year. 28 sold 5 million or more.
Wow.
Okay. Which is a gross income of like gross commissions of like $125,000. Okay. So that means whatever it is, 370 something made less than that. Well, at the time we had 20 people and 10 of our folks were already producing higher than that. And the other 10 were like almost new. So we would kind of view that as like you're just getting your business started. We would encourage people to get to where they sell 10, 15, $20 million of houses every year. And our model supports that in a way that it's relational and it's not, you get the idea. So it again, a culture where you step into the office and it's like the majority of the people really just aren't doing very well, or a lot of people are part-time, or a lot of people just kind of have this idea of I just need something to keep me busy and a couple of houses to sell as nice pocket money. That wears off on everybody else. And so that's why I say we're kind of picky about who we bring in. We really only want to bring in agents who want to build a significant business. It's just more fun. It's more encouraging. It's more inspiring to be around people like that. And I think that ends up creating a culture of its own.
Well, what you're getting at, Pat, is the Pareto Principle, the 80-20 rule. And it's in every business. It's our business. It's your business. It's pretty much everywhere on earth where 20% of the people generate 80% of the results. Sometimes it's even higher than that. This year with the market, with the S&P, it's the top 5 stocks are generating 90% of the return.
Wow.
If you take the top 5 companies out, the bottom, 490 or 495 are basically flat. So what is it in your guys' business in real estate? By the way, my great-grandmother was a very successful Naperville realtor.
Oh, yeah.
My grandpa started a real estate company in Naperville called Era Naper Realty.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, he was Mr. Salesman big time. But I saw it from him, and grew up around that. My dad obviously grew up around that. So I think he kind of stepped into this Pareto rule of being part of that 20, like you guys are. What are the 3 things that you have to do as a realtor to be the 20%?
Well, that's a good question. There's a couple of things come to mind. One is, there's a big difference between working by referral and working word of mouth. Okay. And again, this is where salespeople, I got to say this. Real estate, residential real estate, I guess commercial real estate too, it's a sales business. And if you come into it because you like houses, you come into it because you need something to do and it looked like fun. You like a lot of HGTV. Like I could just get into that. I just love
Selling Sunset.
Oh my!
How accurate is Selling Sunset? Pretty accurate, right?
Do
you watch that ever?
My daughter and my wife they've binged a little bit, and I was like, I gotta leave the room. I can't take it. Our Sugar Grove office, they have named themselves Selling Sunrise as the opposite of Selling Sunset, because they're like, this is horrible. I mean, it's the worst of humanity. There's a lot of shows like that.
So you don't drive a Lamborghini to all your listings, is what you're saying?
No. No.
A yellow Lamborghini.
That'd be cool if somebody could do it. I have a hard time believing that those salespeople are really actually crushing it as much as their wardrobe would suggest they are. I know those checks that they make look amazing, but I don't know that that's actual real.
Well, I think a lot of them are actors too, or actresses, or something like that, and they don't actually put a lot of their agents on who aren't necessarily photogenic. Yeah, like I would never be on Selling Sunset.
And you're blessed for that. So, so the reality is, if you are just kind of into houses, that isn't really going to help you do well at this job. What a good salesperson knows how to do is how to build relationships and how to perform disciplined behaviors over time, right? That's important. And in our business, let's say, Sam and I are friends, and Sam's a past client, and he had a great experience with me. And let's say he just bumped into me and we're hanging out. His antenna for real estate is going to be high. It's going to be fairly high for a little period of time. And if one of his associates happens to mention something about, I'm thinking about selling my house and maybe downsizing or upsizing or whatever, he's going to be real quick to go, hey, do you have a realtor? Because if not, I know somebody who's awesome that you would love. And they're generally going to trust his opinion and go, all right, give me his info. I'm curious. I would love to, if you had a good experience, I'd love to know more. Typically, if too long goes by, and let's say Sam's real estate antenna just kind of naturally is going to drop. If I don't get a touch on him, if I don't, provide some value to his life, if I don't somehow stay in contact, the antenna goes down, and that same conversation 3 months later where I haven't seen him, it's just going to come and go, and Sam's not even going to mention my name because it's just not top of mind. So a good real estate salesperson knows I have to stay in touch with the people who are most likely to pass my name along, and I have to do that in a way that they actually enjoy it, that they're getting some value out of it. Because if it's just making check-in calls where it's like, okay, are we doing this again? Like hey, how's the family? And all right, just checking in, whatever. Like you can get away with that every once in a while because you have to. But if that's your go-to for good, there's no redeeming value for the other person. So it's all about how do I provide value in the interim. So becoming two things that I think are really helpful for real estate. If you can learn your market so that you can be a voice for here's what's happening in your area. People generally need to know because either they own a house or they want to own a house. They kind of need to know what the market's doing and where the leverage is. And then secondly, I've built up a great network of other people that I can refer business to that provide awesome service, that are really good at what they do. And so most of my network has been trained that if they need some work done at their house, they're probably going to call me and say, hey, who do you recommend for siding? We got, storm came through, whatever, we got to get somebody. Or who do you recommend for an attorney for this, or insurance, or you go down the list. I've been able to refer my chiropractor a bunch of business, so it's kind of like if you're the person that they think of when they know we need a recommendation for something, then they're probably thinking about you for real estate too. So I think that when it comes to what does it take to be really good, having the skills of a salesperson is critical. Mm-hmm. Having the kind of personality and the way of being that people are drawn to you and that are good for building relationships. And then I think in the end, to really be able to deliver for your clients, you kind of need to get good at the transaction itself. There are a lot of bad realtors in the market. And unfortunately, when people are maybe, I'm going to give you a number, and this will help make it very clear. Out of all the people who get a real estate license every year, okay, 86% will be out of the business within 18 months.
Wow. Okay.
So if you think about what that means as people replace other people, there are mostly, well, this goes back, same thing, 80-20-ish, right? So many people are getting out of the business and getting replaced with brand new people that even if they're a part of an office that provides good training, they might just not know what they're doing. And they can actually, when people aren't sure what to do, they kind of default to their natural state. And when things can get tense in a real estate transaction, because there's so much emotion, sellers get emotional, buyers get emotional. And sometimes if you're not well trained or experienced enough, you can take on that stress that they're feeling. You take it onto yourself because you want to deliver for them, but then that comes back out into the transaction, and it can ruin a perfectly decent transaction, can get derailed by a hot-headed agent who's just trying to do the right thing for their client. They don't know how. So we use this term 99% drama-free as a kind of one of our monikers for Southwestern Real Estate. Our job is really to diffuse drama at every opportunity. And that's why I say getting good at the transaction, a lot of that means knowing the next pitfall that's likely, that has the potential to start a little fire, and creating conditions so that fire never starts. That's
setting expectations.
Yes.
Yep.
Or as we sometimes call it, answering objections in advance.
Yep.
So as we can learn, and that's a good sales technique that good salespeople learn how to do that so their clients have a better experience altogether.
Well, I want to go back to one thing you said about doing the basics.
Okay.
I think that's really critical. And I use the example all the time. My dad and I were test driving cars. He was going to get a new car. And so we went to 6 or 7 dealerships. And think about what it takes to test drive a car now. Okay,
Yeah.
You have to give them your license, your driver's license. You give them your insurance card. So what do they have on you? They have your name, your address, your phone number, every single piece of critical information. They have it in their system somewhere. And we test drove maybe 6 cars total. Guess how many people actually called back after the test drive?
Is it a disappointing number?
Yes.
Because it should be 6 out of 6, right?
1.
It was 1.
Yep. And guess who he bought the car from? The
Yeah.
guy who called him back.
There you go.
You know, and I tell our team all the time, it's not rocket science. Now, I will apologize to our clients just in case hopefully we haven't dropped the ball like that, but it's not rocket science. It's not hard. You just have to do the basics, and a lot of people just don't do the basics.
Yeah. If you like watching HGTV and you get inspired by wanting to, decorate somebody's house, that's fine, and that's a thing that people, can appreciate. That's just not going to help you build a successful real estate business doing residential sales.
Do you guys do any commercial as well?
We do. I've sold a few commercial buildings over the years, but it kind of depends on what it is. There are certain commercial deals that are pretty straightforward, and if I have all of the information, then it's easy to pull it off in the similar fashion of a residential deal. But if a client brings us something that is just not in our wheelhouse, thankfully we're connected to other commercial brokers that we can connect them to. And so it just depends on what they've got to buy or sell.
Pat, how much of your day now, you're president of the firm, been president since day one.
Yeah.
I'm sure at the beginning a lot more heavy on the day-to-day, the actual sales yourself. What's the breakdown now? Are you pretty heavy on admin stuff? Is it a 50-50 breakdown between admin and selling? Or
So, well, I'll put it in these terms. I would say right now, I'm still spending 75% of my time helping people buy and sell. and I'm spending 25% of my time doing the things that I need to do to be president and lead the company. But the only reason that that's possible is because we have amazing leaders at every level of this thing. And what's true about this is in real estate, for people who own businesses, you'll understand this. It's not a great margin business. If you look at the big boys, like all the major companies, and I'm going to hold off on Remax for a second because the way they measure their profits is a different thing altogether. But everybody else, it's super common for these companies to make anywhere either losing millions of dollars, like you hear with Compass and what they've gone through.
Yeah, what's the issue with Compass exactly?
Oh, yeah, that's probably so the agents I've talked to, I probably shouldn't go there because it's going to sound like I'm trashing them. And
from a corporate standpoint, I mean, I know some of their agents.
Yeah, it's
a really cool company. A lot of them seem to really like it. That's all I've seen. Maybe some of them don't like it, but I look at the company as a stock, like we were looking at it a couple of years ago as a potential investment, and it's a complete disaster as a balance sheet, as an income statement. Do you have any?
Well, I was talking to one of my friends who works there, and I was like, so what's that like when the stock is just like nosediving? He's like, yeah, it's a real thing. Like, he still really likes his office and some of the tools they make available, but it just they can't borrow money. Nobody's giving them any money anymore. And so smarter people than me could probably comment on it and as to why that's all happened. I've heard a few podcasts on it and different things. And
it seems like they tried to do way too much all at once.
Maybe.
And a lot of, like, Zillow ran into the same problem, and they were like, hey, like, we're a tech company, but we also like to swing hammers and want to become a home renovation company. Yeah. And now we're a mortgage company. And now, by the way, we do insurance. And it's like, at a certain point, you might not be good at all those things.
Yeah. And, the funniest thing about it, this is actually super affirming for any realtors out there. Zillow had their, like, iBuyer program where they were buying up houses based on the algorithm, the Zestimate that everybody sees when they go on, how much is my house worth? They go see what Zillow says.
I love the Zestimate, by the way.
Okay. Well, they were using the Zestimate to determine where they had flip opportunities and things like that. And they lost so much money, they had to shut the program down. And in their press release, they said, we have come to find that our algorithm for determining value is unreliable. So it's like, it's kind of helpful to have it. There's a bunch of different versions of that with other websites where they're just basically, tweaking an algorithm to go, well, what's sold around here recently, and what, how much are values going up or down over a certain amount of time. But Zillow doesn't know if you redid your kitchen or if you've got, a finished basement. It just doesn't know any of that stuff. So what's really cool is there for a little window, because Zillow was brand new when we started our company. So I'm hearing all these agents freaking out. They're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be the end of us. They've got all of the MLS. And then Redfin came along and they're like undercutting, like Red Ocean, just undercutting the market. And my friend who worked with me was like, we're done. I'm like, dude, I don't think we're done. There's a difference. Well, let me just say this. The valuation of a property and knowing the market from somebody who's in it every day is hugely beneficial, hugely valuable to the marketplace. And these algorithms just don't know that kind of stuff. So it kind of legitimizes the role the realtor has to play. And even when there's companies like Redfin who do undercut the market with how their pricing structure works, the agents that go to work there are going to work there for the reason that all the business is being handed. So they can just go do real estate, almost like the person who just likes looking at houses. But there isn't enough pay or motivation for them to actually become market experts.
I totally agree with that, and I think there's a huge difference, especially with our business too. Same thing, where there's a difference between a relationship manager, which is essentially what you're describing with Redfin, versus somebody who actually went out and found the deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's night and day.
Yeah. So I think, if somebody knows I'm only getting, like a small sliver of this low price to begin with, and I know that the way I make my money is churning these over the course of the year by doing 100 transactions and playing this one role just to move it down the conveyor belt, you get a totally different client experience and you get different expertise or lack of expertise. So anyway, I've seen those things pop up, and what is continually affirmed in my mind is a market expert who considers the emotional dynamics of a home sale and purchase and makes that experience better for the client has value that I don't see that going away. And they'll come up with new ideas and better ideas, and there will be things that financially might even make sense on the face, but there's that underlying stuff still is important to people, and that's hard to replace.
Well, I think when it counts, you have to have a relationship. At least that's my opinion. And, there's always going to be the certain subset of people out there that are DIY. They cut their own grass. They'll remodel their bathroom themselves. They'll try to sell their house themselves. They'll manage their own investment portfolio, monkey around, to use Sam's word, monkey around, trying to do their own tax return on TurboTax, which we strongly advise against. And, But there are DIYers, okay? That'll always exist. So maybe that fills the market for some of those people. Maybe on the very low end, and you're selling a couple $100,000 house or something, maybe that, Redfin could have a place to play there. But I think when it really counts and you're dealing with a transaction that really matters and you can't get it wrong, I wouldn't want to do it without a salesperson. Yeah. But that's my personality.
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right. And I think people on some level I think the adage of you're going to get what you pay for, I think that actually makes sense to people. And so they'll see the big billboard, we'll sell your house for 1%. And then they go, oh, what a deal. And then they get into the numbers and okay, so it's not exactly 1%. It's 1% plus 2.5%. So it's really 3.5%. And then, this other agent over here who's a real pro said they'll do it for 5. So there's about a 1.5 spread. And this person doesn't seem like they've got their act together. And this person seems like they really do. For that kind of difference, it's like, for most people, they go back to the relationship and they go, well, that's meaningful to me. And even if they're new and meeting me, they're meeting me because their friends Ken and Sharon said, oh, you got to talk to Patrick. Like there's like that conviction in the referral is what does it.
Yeah.
So,
well, I will not sell my own house for the one reason being that I do not want to have to give people tours of my house.
Oh, I can't imagine.
I don't want to be waiting around letting people in and, here's the bathroom, here's the kitchen. Yeah. I have zero interest in that.
I do think there's a certain segment. Well, it goes to what you were talking about before. Like there's a certain part of the population that just goes, I have to do it myself, or I'm smarter than this system. And some people just love feeling like they outsmarted the system, but they don't really have checks and balances to really confirm it. It's just in their mind. Did I really beat the market, or did I just save a few bucks on a commission? How do they know if they got ripped off on their sale, or if they actually got what they could have gotten? So, I guess there's just and again, in the way we train our agents is with an abundance mentality. Mm-hmm. We work hard all year long. There's always enough. And if some people decide to do, for sale by owner, that's totally fine. Just let them do it. If that's what they want to do, just let them do it. Just make sure you're working hard all year long. It'll be a great business, and you can grow that year after year.
Well, I think you guys, like us, being in a services business is really in trend with the general economy too, and that's being the fact that my generation wants to delegate It just seems largely across the board. Experiences are big. People want less and less stuff. They want more and more experiences. They want less and less of separation between the different things they have to do in life, and they want consolidation. And I think you guys are really on trend just economically, just where people are in general in life, of saying, I just want to hand it off to somebody and make sure it's taken care of.
Yeah.
That's the sentiment I get from our clients.
Is your generation millennial? Is that where
I think I'm technically a millennial.
Okay.
I think I'm on the very, very back end of being a millennial.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because just as far as market, trends go, I just heard this yesterday. If you look at populations within the United States, the millennials are getting to that mid-30s age group where this will be the largest buyer demand for housing that we've ever seen in the United States. This will exceed the baby boomer generation. And so what's really interesting is over the next 2 years, that prime age for first-time home buyer is going to hit. And what the people I'm paying attention to are suggesting, rates are going to continue to come down slowly. There might be another bump before the end of the year, but over the next 2 years, those rates are going to come down, most likely to be, if you fast forward to 2025, when all of this millennial is going to be in the prime position, all this millennial buyers are going to hit, rates are probably going to be somewhere in the mid fours. And again, it's all relative to what you're used to, so if people are getting things in the sixes today, mid fours looks, super exciting. When people were getting mortgages for 2.5, 4 was like, oh, I think I'm going to wait out the market. So it's all relative. But just to say this, the way that I'm preparing and the way that our agents are preparing is that we want to have those relationships intact, because over the next 2 years, you're going to see a ton of activity. And that also combines nicely with the fact that new home starts are at an all-time high. So they're building new inventory. So that'll help fix some of the inventory issues we've had the last few years.
Well, and Pat, this is completely opposite what you're talking about, which I totally agree with. And we were early on this call too. We've always been longer on optimists, not pessimists, but all the doom and gloom are pessimists. If you read what they said 10 or 20 years ago, they said all these baby boomers are going to be trying to sell their homes and no millennials are going to want to buy them. It's
right.
Exactly the opposite.
That's correct.
And
you're exactly right.
I tend to see that too. I think you kind of emerged from 08 and 09, which you could call the abyss as far as the housing market's concerned and the stock market.
Yeah.
And even in the darkest of times, I think we were still optimistic, and we were still like, hey, it's bad, but it's not the end of the world, and the sky's not falling. And I sense that from you too. I think there is an optimistic sense as an entrepreneur that you have to have. You have to be doom and gloom enough to prepare for a rainy day, right? Yeah. But you don't need to go fill your bunker in the backyard with canned food and right. ammunition and
right.
meals ready to eat.
Yeah. I would say, when I think back, so again, starting in 2007, I saw home prices drop every year till 2012. They leveled off. 13 was the first year. So think about it. I was in the business for 5 years, and every year the houses were worth less than the year before. So every time I would have to go on a listing presentation, I'd sit down with somebody, I knew I was delivering bad news. And I remember in 2012 sitting down with somebody going, hey, I think your neighbor's house sold for this. I think we can get the same price, which was like breakthrough. And then in 13, to be able to go, this house sold for this, I think you can get more. It was just like, people were so excited. It was so positive. So there was a real long downtrend where there wasn't much to, and again, not being an economist, it wasn't like I was going to figure out how long is this going to last. But what drove me during that time was to go, it's still amazing. No matter what the economy's doing, people have to move. People have to get from this place to that place for a variety of reasons. And if they need to move, there's a transaction that needs to get done, and I need to be the person to help them because it's going to be super stressful. And that was just kind of the way that I set my mindset is there might be less transactions than some other markets, but whatever it is what, I have to go find. So
what's your take on these integrated models, kind of like the Zillows? We kind of touched on it a little bit with Redfin, but even Compass has tried this where they have everything in one place. Because I do think that's somewhat compelling to be able to have everything in a one-shot deal if you don't have your network built out. Like, you've never done a real estate transaction. You don't know a real estate attorney. And you guys are referring people out and saying, here's the guy to talk to. Here's the mortgage guy. I'm sure you have a great relationship with somebody in the area that does that, somebody that does the remodeling like you talked about. But do you see a push where some of this could be vertically integrated and make it easier for people just to get the transaction done all in one place?
Potentially, but I will say it this way. So Southwestern also started a property casualty insurance company. So Southwestern Insurance. So there's like two verticals, right? I can call my guys over there and go, hey, John, I need you to take care of these clients who are buying a house. They need insurance. That's fine. And I'd love putting them in the mix and whatever. But I think what the client ultimately wants is they have come to trust my network of professionals so much that that's kind of the thing that they relish is, who does Pat know who does this thing? Because everybody that he sent us to has been grade A. So I guess if you can have it all built into one thing, that's fine. But there's a difference between like if a plumber, okay, so I have this great plumber, Enterprise Plumbing, ding, send those guys.
Future sponsorship?
There you
maybe.
Go.
We're trying to get Sweet. Do you know what Sweet Green Salads is?
I feel like I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's very fancy salads.
Okay.
They're like $25 for a salad.
Okay.
But I shouldn't say that. They're like $16. But if you get double chicken, I think it's $25.
Okay.
They use a robot to make the salads.
Oh.
And Naperville happens to be the first location in the entire country where they're using these robots to make. It's pretty cool. Check it out.
Are they a sponsor?
We're trying to get them. This is our second time plugging them, but now we have the plumbing company.
Okay. I think it's hard work for me to go make sure that all of the people I'm referring business to match that level of service. But that's what, is the difference between, agents that work with Southwestern Real Estate and maybe agents that work at a place where they have it all baked in.
I did not know the stat about the 18-month. 86%, you said?
Those are the numbers I've heard. I mean, it's got to fluctuate over the years, but it's right around there every, annually. Yeah,
because somebody who, out of the 86% that'll be gone in 18 months, they're not going to have those networks and connections built out. And
yeah. So what we do with our new people is we go, okay, here's all the list of professionals that your clients are probably going to ask you, who do you know that does a great job in this? So go build relationships with people who do this and tell those folks, if you don't deliver on the service, then I got to go find another person. Okay. So that you really leverage in, they're going to deliver. Now, if Andy's a brand new agent and he doesn't have a full network built out and it's going to take time, then we say, Andy, listen, I have a relationship with Enterprise Plumbing, and Don Stout is going to send all of his real estate referrals to me. But if you want to make sure you're passing a good plumber along, you can use them for now. And then as you build a good relationship with a plumber down the road, you can start sending them there. But what you can't do is just try somebody that's a wild card. So here's a known thing you can pass your clients to, and now you build your relationships to find the replacement for that for your network. So because in the end, obviously, what we're trying to do is then also develop reciprocating relationships, right? So that the plumber knows when his friends or clients are going, we're thinking about selling the house, he's quick on the draw to send them my direction. But there's no, but it's all about service. It's all about making sure that referral reflects back well onto you.
Pat, it's interesting because I watched my great grandmother who had the real estate.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're all, if you're really, really good, like you guys are, and you're in Glen Ellen, you and your family live in Glen Ellen and the kind of the Wheaton area and all that,
Yeah.
you almost become the quasi mayor of the town if you're upper echelon realtor.
Yeah.
You know, and I watched this with my great grandmother, my grandpa, where you know everybody knows who you are. And it is interesting because it's not just that final transaction, which a lot of people think about with real estate and realtors is, oh, you're just going to sell my house. It's like, no, this can truly be a trusted advisor for you and your family. And a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to buy a house and I'll get a 30-year mortgage. I'll be in the house for 30 years. I think the stats, like every 5 years people move or something, or every 7 years or something like that. You would know better than me. So it is really staying top of mind and constantly being that trusted family advisor where people do think of you next time they're going to make a move.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think kind of represents that is I don't know how I came up with this years ago, probably just trying to stay top of mind. I'm like, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to have some T-shirts made for all my customers, clients, so that they, at least they're opening the drawer and they're like, oh, there's Pat Roach, a little company thing on a T-shirt. And so I started making these, and then every year and a half, I need to do a new design, and I'll come up with something, and then I'll drive around dropping off the new T-shirts for people. T-shirts, you would think it's not that big of a deal, right? It's a $10 shirt or whatever it is, but
I always look forward to getting mine from you, Pat.
They look great and they're super comfortable. But people bump into other people wearing Pat Roach T-shirts.
Oh, that's cool.
And so I'm throwing a big client party on August 11th over at Lake Ellen. And the thing is, you get double entrance into the door prizes if you wear your Pat Roach T-shirt. So it's going to be like a couple hundred people all wearing Pat Roach T-shirts. But it's like, you can, if you do it right, you can kind of create a community around it where even people who meet each other within the thing, they're just kind of like, oh yeah, we know the same person, So it's less, it's less about Pat Roach. It's more about, that's just a label that goes on a thing that represents a community and a certain feeling, that goes with that.
So, Pat, you're in the middle of the transaction. You're dealing with plumbers, roofers, siders, electricians. You know all these people that are on the front lines of small business. Mm-hmm. You've got to have, and I know you said you're not an economist, and that's probably a good thing because a lot of economists have gotten it very, very wrong for a very long time. Sure. I actually think people like yourself, small business owners, have a much better idea and grasp on what's really going on. What is going on? Are you seeing that there still is demand? Are people still spending money? Are you seeing a slowdown when you talk to people, business owners in particular? Are they getting a little bit nervous, but they're saying things are okay? What exactly are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, most of the folks I send business to have a steady flow of business that they don't seem too concerned about it. I guess it depends who they're listening to, but from what they're dealing with today, they don't seem too concerned. What I'm noticing with real estate, it's really interesting. If you look at our Florida offices, if you look at our offices in Texas, Tennessee's having a little bit of a slowdown right now, but Florida and Texas, for example, there's not a seasonal component to it like there is here in the Midwest. So they just like everything has multiple offers. They can't find any houses.
Does that ever stop or?
Well, so here's where it's right now. Those are the conditions, mostly due to the low inventory that we have. So you just have a reasonably high demand. And even if that's dropped down a little bit, the reason it stays still strong, even with the higher rates, is because renting is the alternative, and rents are going up faster. So people have to live somewhere. And as much as they might wish they could have had that low rate a couple of years ago, they're like, no, it's cheaper than renting, the tax advantages and everything considered. So low inventory is pretty much a real thing in almost any market today. What I'm seeing here, and this happens every year, it's just strange. I've seen a couple of anomalies over my 16 years that didn't fit this, but the way things work here is in January, my phone starts ringing, okay, with people going, yeah, I want to buy a house this year, or we're thinking we want to sell the house this year, and whatever time. But there isn't a ton of transactional volume in January. You'll get a little bit, but then it grows in February, and then in March, April, May, and even in June, the transactions are still high because of the business that was done leading up to those closings. But summer hits, and the chill level just drops the activity down a notch or two. So I had a couple the other day, got a house. There were a bunch of showings on it. It was a nice house. They at a popular price point, and we made an offer. They accepted our offer without it turning into multiple offers. And I was like, that might be the first time this season that I've seen that.
What's a popular price point? Glen Ellen, was it Glen Ellen, Wheaton area?
It was a Wheaton house, and it was like in the upper 300s, like starter home type of thing. So anything at the low end. So somebody had their starter condo the other day in Bloomingdale, and I think that sold for like $215 or something like that. So that's like, this was his condo that he got as a single guy, and now they've moved into a family home, and so he's getting rid of that. So you've kind of got this like super entry level in the twos. Then you've got like starter houses for young families or young couples that are in the 3s and 4s. And then you've got your move up housing that could be anywhere 5 to 7 or whatever. And then, it just depends on kind of what kind of price point people can afford, but it kind of feels like just about every price point is popular right now. Like there's just not enough inventory.
There is a house for sale downtown Naperville for $15 million, and it has not moved in, I think, 2 years.
Okay. I feel like I know what the house you're talking about. I'm like, yeah, that's interesting. So everything's popular. But what was the question? I think I kind of got lost in that.
Yeah, I don't remember either. I was going to ask you this because we were kind of talking about Florida's, I think, where we were.
Oh, yeah. So let me continue that trend. So things chill during the summer for a couple months, and then the activity will start back up in August, September, and then it'll just kind of cruise down into December. But there's still, as a company, we always, I don't know if it's because we really encourage people to have a strong finish to the year, but December is always a good month. And so, but you can watch that trend seasonally here in the Midwest. Happens some version of that almost every year. The year where there was an anomaly was 2020, where, COVID hit and everything shut down. And then you had all of these 4 months of pent up demand that had to get absorbed. And that trend kind of just grew as the year went on. So it didn't really dip or do anything, during the colder months.
So was 2020 your record year, or was it 2021?
2021. Yeah.
2021.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was phenomenal. I mean, I had been selling, let's see here. I had been selling about 18 million dollars of real estate as an individual salesperson, and that year I sold 20 million in the first 6 months.
Wow.
I was like, it was exhausting, but it was super fun. I mean, kind of. And then I sold 5 million in the back half of the year, so it was kind of like just perfect storm of activity, and it all came together. And it was like, for somebody who runs their own business, it's like you kind of live for moments like that where it all kind of comes together, because other times where it really isn't coming together, and that's hard. So to get that little like gem was pretty special. And then things kind of sank back into more of a normal pace.
So walk us through the years then, and I'm just going to completely guess here, you tell me if I'm right or wrong. 2019 record year leading up to 2019?
As a company it was, and yeah, personal production I think it was also. 2020
little drop off, or about the same?
2020 actually was an increase.
And okay.
Even with that gap at the beginning, the back 2/3 of the year was so strong that it made up for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then 2021, record year. 2022, a little bit of a drop-off.
A little bit of a drop-off.
And then how's 2023 shaping out so far?
We're on pace with last year's production as a company. My personal sales, I think I'm a couple of ticks below last year, but it's still very strong. So it's not like, it's kind of one of those things like all the bills are getting paid, nobody's freaking out, but it isn't the same pace as what the last couple of years have been.
Is that only because of inventory? Like if you had the inventory, would it be?
I think the higher rates actually have reduced the buyer pool a little bit. But having said all that, okay, I can tell you where the real problem, well, let's say, is this a real problem? This is where it's not even a problem. This is the reality of what I'm experiencing. If you look at year in and year out, usually half of my client base are buyers and the other half are sellers, okay? This year, it's probably 80% buyers. And so there's just like, what is different about this year for my business is you get a lot of people who are going, I kind of would like a downsize, or I'd kind of like to upgrade, but I don't want to give up this 2.5% mortgage. And so they're kind of just sitting on it, which is fine. It's understandable. And I don't fault anybody for that if that's where they're at. The reality is you can only do that as a, let's say a family is going to add another kid, they can only be like loving that low mortgage more than the elbow room that they need for so long. So that's where, again, if the experts are right, if we start to see rates get into the high fours by next year and mid fours by 2025, those are the people who go, all right, forget it. I'll lose a little bit on the rate and I'm going to get the house I actually need because that's actually got more psychic income than me staying here. So where I'm seeing the difference is less people calling me saying, hey, I want to sell this house. The people who have been selling have ultimately ended up as cash buyers. And I'm seeing a lot more of cash buyers in my distribution of clients this year than I would normally see. And that's kind of where they're like, it doesn't really matter what the rates are. I'm just paying cash anyway. So
because of people not moving, they've got the 2.5% rate, like my wife and I, and we've talked about this because we just had our first son. Now we're talking future plans. What are we going to do? Our house is going to cover us, I think, for at least a couple kids.
Okay.
But it's exactly that thought of what do you do after 3, even beyond that, we are going to have to do something. So does that put us into an all-out abyss 2-3 years from now because people just start moving? Is the Fed going to have to aggressively cut? Where do we end up? Do you think we kind of putz around here for the next couple years? Do we have a big drop-off?
I think you're going to see home prices are going to continue to climb over the next few years. I think my hope is that it doesn't just go berserk. I would think it's just going to be because we're still going to have this combination. If you think about lower rates with this demand bubble that's coming, the question is going to be where the house is going to come from. So they have to build those over the next 2 years in order to absorb a lot of that. But one of the cool things is like, if you can stay in your current house longer, then you save. If let's say if you only have to move 4 times instead of 5 times in your lifetime, then there's a bunch of costs that go with selling a house every time you need to do it. So you can actually save money by only needing to move 4 times instead of 5. So if the house you've got right now, if you planned accordingly and you're like maybe spent a little bit more than you thought you would, but it allows you to stay in that house longer, that can turn out to be a pretty good financial decision. So where it's going to be after that, I don't even know if all this is going to come to fruition the way I'm talking about it, but smarter
you
people,
don't have a crystal ball.
That's another way of saying it. But smart people that I listen to, this is the way they're painting the picture. It seems to make sense to me. So we'll see. Either way, I know what my job is to make sure that the clients that work with me are so happy that they can't help but tell all their friends. If I do that, then the market will be what it is, and our business will be fine.
Okay, last question for you. Is anyone going to be left in Illinois? Or is everyone just going to live in Texas and Florida and Tennessee after this whole thing's over?
Man, that's a good question. Okay, the way that I tend to think about that, and you guys maybe you've looked at this as well. I haven't looked in the last probably 6 months or 9 months or something like that, but when I last looked, DuPage County and Kane County, which is where I do most of my business, Kane County, those two counties have had steady population growth for a long time. Steady population growth for a long time. And I believe last time I looked, DuPage was even, and Kane was still up, but just not anywhere close to its normal growth pattern. So as much as there is that's kind of difficult about Illinois, I have two thoughts on it. One is there's enough that is really desirable for families and people to be in the western suburbs that seems like that's going to at least hold a population. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing is when I watch the Today Show every morning and Al Roker's up there doing the weather report, I mean, I've never thought of Chicago as an ideal weather place, but when you look at the non-catastrophic weather that we get, we just don't get that much stuff that's going on where it's yeah, your whole place just burned up, or a tornado or a flood. I mean, our weather is pretty non-dangerous.
And no shark attacks.
No shark attacks. So we take all of that, put that together. It's what if in a few years, what if forecasting 5-10 years out, if it's where you don't have super extreme weather, it's around Chicago. That could be kind of cool.
If you get bit in Lake Michigan, it's not a shark, it's probably an Asian carp.
Yeah, there you go. Which, don't eat it, but
I hear that's a delicacy. They ship it back to China. Apparently it's a big thing.
Really?
It's a disgusting fish.
Okay.
Have you ever seen a picture of one?
I feel like when they were flying, they're the ones that jump out of the river.
Yeah, it's pretty gross.
Yeah, I've seen some of those videos.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think maybe global warming's going to end up making Chicago really desirable.
There you go.
So,
Sam, you're a fisher.
Yeah, but I don't fish for Asian carp and send it back to China.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever eaten one?
Nope.
Yeah, it's pretty nasty.
I'm not that adventurous on the eating side of things.
Yeah.
Carp in general, you probably stay away from it.
Yeah, it doesn't have a good name to start with.
That's right.
Yeah. Pat, thank you so much for being on.